What's good, YouTube? If you want to find out the most optimal rep range for building muscle, you should definitely watch this entire video. So I feel like in the past, most people thought that you have to do high rep ranges for building muscle, like 12 plus rep ranges. But what I feel like is going on currently is that most people think that you can build just as much muscle in the low rep ranges, let's say 1 to 5, as the higher rep ranges, let's say 8 to 15. And if you asked me a year ago, I would probably say that you can build muscle just as fine sticking to 5 reps instead of 10 reps. But today I'm going to explain why that's not necessarily the case. There's even a lot more to it that I'm going to be covering in this video today, because then the video probably would take like an hour, and I maybe make that in the future, who knows. And if you know a thing or two about building muscle, you probably know that fast twitch muscle fibers responds better to another rep range than slow twitch muscle fibers. And that's not even the most important to talk about when it comes to what rep ranges are good for building muscle. So we're going to talk about the most important thing today, which is going to make a big difference, and hopefully this video will change your perspective on what rep ranges to choose when building muscle. So the literature and science is pretty clear on one thing. If you do the same amount of volume on low reps and high reps, you're going to get the exact same amount of hypertrophy. So in that end, can we just end the video? I just said that you can get the same amount of muscle, the same amount of hypertrophy if you do different rep ranges, as long as you stick to the same amount of volume. But that's the key word, the same amount of volume. I've actually made a graph so that you can understand this in a much more simplistic level. So this line is the amount of reps, and this line is the amount of fatigue you accumulate. And if you're doing bodybuilding, you should minimize the amount of fatigue you get so that you can recover properly, which means that you're going to recover from more sets, more reps, and thus be able to do more and thus build more muscle. I have a pretty ugly handwriting, but what I typed out is a graph that shows rep ranges changes fatigue when volume is matched. And by the way, this is not 100% accurate. This is just a pretty realistic estimation on how the fatigue to rep range scale actually works. So the graph is starting off with 12 reps, and the fatigue is not that high, it's in the middle. But when we go in the lower rep ranges, our fatigue goes up. Why? You have the same amount of volume when you do 3 sets of 8 reps as you do when you do 8 sets of 3 reps. So even though you can accumulate the same amount of hypertrophy from both of those scenarios, your body is simply going to be much more fatigued from doing 8 sets of 3 reps than from doing 3 sets of 8 reps. Why? It's because intensity is much higher. And yes, intensity is important when building muscle, but it's more important when building strength compared to building muscle. When we're talking about building muscle, volume should be the first consideration. So what I just said now, I hope that it made you realize that when doing lower reps, you can still get the same amount of hypertrophy, but you're gonna accumulate much more fatigue. And that's going to make it so that you can recover worse from your sets and reps, so you can do less overall work. So by what we talked about now, I hope that you understood that yes, you can build the same amount of muscle technically when it comes to low reps and high reps, but when you're doing lower reps, as we can see in this graph right here, fatigue goes higher, and when fatigue is higher, you have to spend more time recovering, and it's overall harder to recover, which basically means that you have to do less amount of volume and work for building muscle. So by that explanation, I hope that you now understand that yes, if the volume is matched, you can build the same amount of muscle, but there's a but, as I said. When you're doing the low rep ranges, your fatigue is going to be higher, and when fatigue is higher, you have to recover more, meaning you can't do as much volume, and thus you won't get as big. So just to make sure that you understand this, I'm just going to be saying it in another perspective. You are able to recover from more volume when performing in the typical rep ranges. So since the fatigue is lower, when you're working in the high rep ranges, you're able to do more volume, thus letting you do more overall work without reaching an overtrained state. My palms are fucking getting sweaty just from holding that graph. So I hope you learned something from this video. Doing higher reps is actually better for hypertrophy, simply because fatigue is going to be lower when performing in the higher rep ranges, thus letting you do more work, thus letting you put on more size. I hope that this video wasn't confusing at all. I tried to make it as simplistic as possible, because personally I've seen a lot of people that don't fully grasp the idea or just don't get it at all. Hopefully you understand it now though. So if you're only training for bodybuilding and not strength or powerlifting, you should probably cut off the 3 reps. Just understand this and I'll be happy. low rep ranges accumulate a lot more fatigue than higher rep ranges. Thank you. I hope you like this video. Please like it. Hopefully you learned something as well. Please subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.